to say thank you again, and this marks the beginning of a week that will be filled with building, teaching, sharing, shaping, collaborating, and really celebrating all the great activity here in our city. This is the culmination now of a years-long effort to bring about the third Thrival Innovation and Music Festival. So thank you all for being here for that. 3 years ago, we had this crazy idea that, Pittsburgh had become the place that really embraced ideas that were big and ambitious and somewhat different and maybe even a little bit risky. And, guess what? We're here today. Everyone in this room, all the organizations that have been involved, all the corporations who have helped us, all the foundations who have helped us, they said, yeah, Thrill Mill, Thrival, this sounds like a pretty good idea. Maybe we should give this a shot. When I came back to Pittsburgh in 2006, that's the city that I wanted to be a part of, the city that said, let's take those risks. And so I'm really overjoyed that our stakeholders have helped to make this a reality today. We stand here at the beginning of what's going to be a full week of programming. We have 30 programs taking place throughout the week, that are going to involve dozens of organizations at locations all over the city, starting here in the Pittsburgh City Theater in the South Side. We have 80 speakers. Those include, obviously, the best and the brightest that we have here in our city, but, really what's cool is it also includes folks from Austin, Denver, Chicago, Boston, Portland, San Francisco, New York, and Washington, D.C., among others. So we're attracting really great talent to our city and partnering that really well with the great talent that we already have here to help share new ideas and spread new thoughts about what the city is going to be moving forward. So we're taking this event at the end of the week to a remediated brownfield that's down in Hazelwood, the Almano site. That's been a process now 10 years in the making, and we're really excited to be bringing what's going to be 2 days of celebrating all the energy and excitement in the city, tens of thousands of people in attendance, 25 national acts. It's a very, very exciting time. And so I hope all of you are able to attend all of these events this week and make it down there this weekend to discuss with each other what you've learned. Hopefully have a drink from me, because I probably have to wait till next week to do that, and really enjoy yourselves. And very importantly, this Thrival marks a shift in our philosophy with regard to sponsorships and partnerships. Our goal here isn't just to slap a name on a website and then bring them up and say, hey, thank you so much, and move onward. But we're really looking for deep and meaningful partnerships with the organizations that are involved. And so with that being said, we'd really like to thank and recognize UPMC Enterprises, which serves as the presenting sponsor for this year's festival. And, when we started talking to UPMC Enterprises about this, they said, look, we don't want to just be the name on the thing. What we want to talk about is how we can really help advance healthcare technology in the city and also build a stronger community as a whole. And we really thought that was a great idea. And what we were looking for is as you all know, Thrival is essentially the largest program that we put on for Thrill Mill, which is the nonprofit organization in East Liberty that houses early stage startups. And we were looking for opportunities to partner with organizations with industry expertise that could really help accelerate the growth of early stage businesses. So now we have this great partnership with UPMC Enterprises to help locate early stage healthcare startups and bring them along, help them iterate, help them build their business model, help them identify customers, and then work in tandem with the expertise that UPMC Enterprises brings to the table to take those companies to the next level. So that's a very exciting opportunity. And throughout this week, you're going to learn about many other relationships and sponsorships and partnerships with Thrival, including CMU, GNC, University of Pittsburgh, Chatham, RMU, Sprout Fund. The list goes on and on. Today, this event is brought to you by Saul Ewing. They've sponsored this entire day of programming, and it was a very important mission for them to make sure that they were a part of this particular day of events. Now, I know all of you have very busy schedules and a lot on your plate, but I would encourage you to go to as many events as you can this week, because I think it's a great opportunity to learn and to share. And with that being said, I'm just going to call it quits now and move on to the folks here who you really want to hear from. And we'll start with James McNeil, who's the managing director of Pittsburgh City Theater. So thank you again for being here. I look forward to seeing you all throughout the week.
I work in the theater, so I'll try to stay on script myself. Thank you, Bobby, and welcome to the Hamburg Studio Theater here at City Theater Company. It is absolutely a thrill to host Thrill Mill and the Thrival Festival, and thank you for choosing our campus to kick off this year's festival. Here at City, we are committed to true partnership, and we believe that the best types of partnership exist cross-discipline, cross-platform, and across industry. When we look beyond the comforts of the fields we know, we can find extraordinary similarities. You're here because of your belief in the big and bold idea, and here at City Theater, we believe the same thing. We are dedicated to new plays, to the contemporary playwright, and to the belief that theater and the arts as a whole can play an important role in shaping the future. Just like Thrival and Thrill Mill, we are inspired by innovation. In fact, the New York Times has called us Pittsburgh's most innovative theater company. That's because to produce new plays is to take a chance on the unknown. We are selling a product that folks don't yet know of, often by writers they've never heard of. You see, new plays exist without the safety net of tradition. We have to be willing to take a chance on failing so as to succeed. That might sound familiar. It's also great to have the mayor back to City Theater. I just want to say that it is a privilege to live and work in a city that is so keen to encourage its next chapter and future, and also a city and a government that sees its arts and cultural organizations not as incidental assets, but as key pieces and drivers to the region's success. Here at City Theater, we are proud of our home in Pittsburgh and for our role in putting Pittsburgh on the national map for innovation as an incubator for new work. I hope you'll join us this season. There are brochures out everywhere. There's even a $5 discount code in them. I hope you'll check out our season that kicks off next month with The Night Alive in our main stage across the pavilion by Connor McPherson. And then we have 5 more new plays that follow all the way to June. It's a wonderful season. I really encourage you to come and check out what we're serving here at City Theater. I know that we're doing a sneak peek on the 26th later in the festival, so you can check out some of what we're doing then. But mostly, I really just encourage you to support all the arts in the city. We are really a part of the fabric and a big part of it, and we're just thrilled to have you here. If you see any of our staff, if you have any questions, please reach out and ask. If you have a business card, there's a free ticket giveaway out in the lobby. And otherwise, just welcome to City Theater. Have a great week, and congratulations on a fantastic festival. Thank you all.
Good afternoon. Hey. Oh, come on, I need more than that. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Great. So that's me. My name's Seth Hufford. I have a little company called The People Group. Do work with organizations around strategy, leadership development, and some policy and advocacy work. So I was invited to give some opening remarks, briefly frame some of the panels that you'll be hearing from this afternoon. So my pleasure to do that. And I wanted to just set some broader context about what we're talking about and hit on some of the themes that you already heard from our 2 openers about what's needed in today's world. So enjoy. So everyone recognize this picture? What is it? Pittsburgh. From when? 40s? 60s? 70s even? All right, good to hear a variety of responses. This is Pittsburgh in about 1945. As you can see, no Point State Park, no fountain. In the far distance, you can see the steel mills belching smoke, pollution into the air. And you have a hard time even seeing the Cathedral of Learning, which is kind of clouded in this view. Point being, and whether it was 1965 or 1945, the world has changed dramatically in the last 50 years. During this time, the world was a little bit more local, right? We didn't have the type of information that we have today about what's going on throughout the world. It was a little bit more stable in that, you went to your job, whether it was in a downtown office building or at the steel mill, and you pretty much stayed in that job for most of your career, right? It was also a bit more limited in what you could do, where you could go. People didn't travel. There was not the type of global connectivity that we have today. And lastly, the world was a bit more hierarchical, right? It was a top-down kind of world. Well, the world has shifted, right? How many of you are familiar with this term VUCA? We must be in a kind of public-oriented space, because this is a real big buzzword in the business community right now, VUCA. It stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And it actually comes from a military term that was used, but it's really talking about how the world has changed. I put this past some students in the public service degree that I teach in at Pitt, and they felt really uncomfortable with this term. They felt it was it did have that militaristic viewpoint, a little bit negative in what it said. So they came up with 3 C's, right? That the world is changing, and that it's connected, and that it's complex. Point being is, it's much more of a bottom-up world, right? But things are complex. They're ambiguous. We don't necessarily have all the answers to the big challenges we face, right? And we live in a very much a global world. So this is not saying we don't need white men. Being one of them, we do need white men. But the point is that the way that we look at leadership and how things get done needs to change. It's not about one person accomplishing things, right? And certainly in this country, that has been our tradition. Even with the election of presidents, we put a lot of hope and change into one individual. But that's not how things get done in today's world, in that VUCA world. Leadership then becomes about guiding people through the unknown to reach a new future, right? So, whether it's complete streets and the work that the mayor is doing to change how we think about our environment, right? Or it's my friend Alec Rieger, who you'll hear from later, who is all about new placemaking. Or it's about changing neighborhoods and how that happens, right? And making sure that it's inclusive for all residents. It's about moving things to a new future and not necessarily having all the answers about how that's going to happen. So how do you do that, right? You really have to disrupt or change the current system with purpose. And you might not know the how, but as long as you're clear on the why this needs to happen, that helps you through that, right? So but think about this disruption with purpose. It's about innovation. It's about changing things and how they are to something that is new and better, right? So the status quo is what people know. That's what they expect. And I think you can, a good indicator, if you will, of change is that you're pissing people off, right? Because they're used to this, and you're trying to say, no, there's a different future that you can imagine, right? So when you start pissing people off, you know you're doing things differently and from what they expect. So then where this leads you is that as you see challenges in this changing world that we live in, this complex world that we live in, you can't just act like you used to act, right? So whether it's the example of the young boy in Texas who brought the clock to his class, maybe 50 years ago that would have been an isolated local event, but with Twitter, it's a global event, right? The decisions that are made by the people in that school had global ramifications. So you can't just see something and act, right? You've got to map out what's going on here? What are the circumstances? Who's involved? How is this going to play out? You have to explore what are the different possibilities. And again, with innovation, that iteration that was talked about, whether it's here at City Theater or the work that Thrill Mill is doing with companies, what are all the possibilities? How can we move forward? How can we get broad input to work with other people and then act in concert with other folks? Right? So it's a new way of acting, a new definition of leadership, a new way of dealing with today's world. So I hope that makes sense. It sets some context. And really it's about thinking differently, right? So, whether, as you hear from the next panel, which includes the mayor of our fair city, mayor of the city of Braddock, right? Bill Generette, and Tara, they are thinking about how to reshape cities, right, in the new era. Or you hear about the connections globally that you'll hear from the second panel, or from the third panel about changing neighborhoods. I'd like you to really think differently about how things can get done in today's world and what it means both here in Pittsburgh and what it means globally. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce the mayor of Pittsburgh, Bill Peduto, who will then take us through this next panel. Thank you for your time.
Bill, you guys want to just jump right in. Good to see you, buddy. Oh, Bill. Saw you on the news the other day. For what? I don't. Some big announcement, and I wished I could have been there with you. I was following it on Twitter and had a little tear in my eye. But wish you all the luck in the world with that.
Thank you. And can I make an announcement?
Yep.
At 3:30, I have to go stuff ass into a plane seat, so I won't be able to stay as long as I wish I could. But you'll see me getting up, but it's not because of anything that anyone said.
So let's just start. Let's jump into it. I mean, Seth sort of laid the groundwork. And if you go back to 1940s, David Lawrence is the mayor of Pittsburgh. He meets with Mellon at the Duquesne Club. They come up with this way that they're going to turn an industrial city into a corporate city. They elicit the support of the corporate CEOs. They take a wrecking ball and demolition and start to create a new path to a city, and they change a culture in that. If that's the model of 1945, and John, I'm going to start with you. What's the model of today?
Oh, well, it's a funny story. I actually got thrown out of the Duquesne Club for the dress code violation. And I think that's a good metaphor for just, kind of not fitting into the traditional mold. I try not to make people angry by upsetting the status quo, but we've done some of that early on in Braddock, and moving the ball forward. And I know you've been encountering that through your whole political career too. Is that when you see change, when you see something wrong, you have to do something about it, and that comes from inside. And that's what this whole thing about Braddock has been about for me personally.
What are the challenges? I mean, you come in there, and obviously there are going to be those that say you're not 3 generations deep, and what do you know about Braddock? And
sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, there was just a lot of challenges, but at the end of the day, people just wanted to see changes, and people just wanted to see something good happen. You look like a mayor, and I mean that in a good way. I don't, and so I've had a lot of different barriers thrown at me out there that just my appearance and would have caused. Not the least of which is that I have a shaved head and a goatee. But those things eventually turned into assets, and we've been able to make some changes by demonstrating a level of sincerity and commitment to the cause that that we're not leaving, and done so with the help of my lovely wife there, Giselle, in the front row, demonstrating a real commitment to change, and that we're going to be there to see that through.
Tara, what's the model? I mean, if you're going to create a new city and you want it to be the city that's for everyone, what do you bake into the DNA to make it happen? Obviously, in the old days, it was a few white guys that got together behind a closed door. What does it look like today, and how do you do it?
The thing about models is that they always are meant to be broken. So I don't know if there's one particular model that we can look at that we can find a solution in, but I will say that when we talk about unseen populations, that's really where the power is. I look at Black women in the city and I see them holding it down in the neighborhoods that are often the ones that have vacant lots, that have the most amount of crime, but we don't talk about Black women. So where is the investment in Black women? Where is the investment in other marginalized communities that are also holding it down in other ways that are unseen? So I would sort of take the model thing and flip it on its head and say, where are the outliers? That's where we should be focusing.
Bill, a lot taking off in this city, a lot clickbaity type websites that say we're the best in this and the top 5 in this category. What's the truth to it? Where is it right now? Where do you see this city and this region being able to excel? And where do you think maybe there's some smoke and mirror that we need to be able to recognize in order to be able to truly get to the type of list that we want to be on?
Sure. I think the truth is complex. We are doing well in a lot of different categories, but it's like sales. You're only as good as your last sale. And what has made us get to the point where we are is our hunger, our passion, our courage, our ability to face the truth. If we didn't face the truth, we would look like Detroit. Literally, we look like Youngstown. We don't, because we faced the truth. But the truth now is one around equity, and we have about 30 to 40% of our population, that's Black, white, Latino, and others, that aren't connected and have the potential to not be connected. And if we don't deal with that truth, and if we don't bake equity into everything that we do, and then we could see a lot of the stuff that we've worked so hard to achieve just totally reverse. And so I really think it's about being honest and not being afraid, and not to confront the problems, to celebrate, but to celebrate real quick and then get back onto the business.
And can I add something about lists? The thing about lists is that they're actually created by somebody who came up with their own algorithm. So one thing that Café con Leche did was we created our own lists because we weren't seeing Latinos represented in the way that we wanted to be represented in the city of Pittsburgh. So we made the top 10 Latinos that are making a difference in Pittsburgh. And we're currently working on the best of Latinoburg. Because at the end of the day, lists are marketing. So if you want to be marketed by the way that you want to be marketed, make up your own marketing campaign. It is very cheap now.
John, you represent a community that is probably by any list at the bottom. 90% of the population since the 1950s gone. Vacant, blight, low income, low graduation rates from high school. Looking at the challenges you face and trying to rebuild the community, and then seeing it as a regional issue as well. What are our biggest challenges?
Well, our biggest challenges is and I would say that in my community, in your community that you lead, in the region and in the nation, is inequality, and that's not going to be solved by a small town mayor. It's not going to be served by a nice regional city mayor. It's going to be only solved by all of us collectively taking it on. I never forget that I'm one phone call away from humility, and I never take the chance to kind of say, yeah, we got this going, because there's always going to be challenges that come up, and the worst kind of, when your phone rings at 2 o'clock in the morning, that I'm sure Bill can relate to. So to me, it's about taking on inequality, and that's why I'm doing the next big thing, and taking this message to a bigger platform, that we as a society have reached a point of insustainability when it comes to this huge gap. And it is in every gap. It's in education, it's in healthcare, it's in public safety, it's even in the air that we breathe, and it's not going to be solved in my lifetime, but it's my hope that it's going to be steered in the right direction so that my own children won't grow up in that kind of inequality.
So, Bill, you deal with this issue on a lot of the different entrepreneurial, economic development, technology fields. In the past, there's been a lot of redlining that's occurred on a lot of the different areas that John spoke about. Well, what are the opportunities to make sure that we don't do the same thing when it comes to a new economy, and that everyone has an opportunity to be a part. And what are you seeing on the ground where success stories are actually occurring?
Sure. We have to look at people and communities as assets and not through a deficit lens. We have to realize that people are no different despite socioeconomic backgrounds and privilege. Too often the redlining happens because we see communities and people different, and we figure out ways either overtly or de facto just to sort of work with our clan, stay around our clan, and that's problematic. I mean, I think there's a lot of good stuff happening here in the city around equity and inclusion. The challenge is scaling it because as we all know, it's tough work. It's tough work, but there's some really good stuff. And I think recently, City of Pittsburgh launched an inclusive innovation roadmap, and I see, Deborah Lamb here, and that's really important because it's really going to be policy. Like I said, this is the fight that every community is taking on. Nobody can say we're doing income inequality well, and that's nationally, globally, but it's going to take policy, and it's going to be using that policy to really scale things. I mean, I think we have some great programs. We have a great internship program, 100 interns. Well, until we're doing 5,000 interns, it's not going to move the needle. So I think one of the things we have to get out of here in Pittsburgh is doing little stuff real well. We do little stuff and we congratulate ourselves. How do we scale that stuff? And I'm all about trying to figure out how we scale that in equity and having the real conversations about it.
Tara, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think the scaling thing is a really good point. I think the other thing that I'm hearing is leadership, and that was sort of made in the opening, remarks of this panel. And I think we need to think about what does leadership actually mean. We do a great job of PR around the problem. We do a great job of PR around researching the problem. We don't really do a great job around even creating an implementation plan, let alone implementation. I invite us to think about what does it actually mean as a leader to give your seat up to a young person or to a new person. I encourage people to run for office, even if it seems impossible, especially women, especially people of color, especially gay people. I think that, again, if we're going to break the model and we're going to focus on the outliers, we ourselves have to put ourselves in the middle. We have to centralize ourselves.
A little bit about leadership, John. The great quote from Lao Zhu, when the best leader's work is done, the people say we did it ourselves. It sort of breaks away from the mold of what we've traditionally believed leadership is in Pittsburgh. It's always been a top-down model. Mm-hmm. I guess two questions. Number one, what do you believe the role of the leader is, and what type of leadership is needed? And number two, how do you break away from what is believed to be the perception of leadership if it is the top-down model?
Well, I think leadership is different in every scenario, and I think that's the definition of a leader. And to me, it's always been about projecting and sharing your vision with as many people as you can, and getting a perfect consensus is never going to happen. And the joke is there's going to be a study to study how many studies there've been.
Right.
And it's like my football coach said when I asked him a question about I got that play wrong. He's like, whenever you're not sure, just go hit somebody in a different color jersey. And it's like sometimes you have to just step in and do what needs to be done. I mean, in Braddock, for example, there's so many things that are right in your face that you have to handle that the aspiration will take a back seat. But you never forget the direction that you ultimately want to go, and that's for a safer, more just community. And you have a lot of different layers of bureaucracy and different agencies to help in a bigger city. But in Braddock, it's like hey, can I call your people? It's like, well, I am my people. At the mayor's office. So it's different at every level, but I just think it's important that any leader share his or her vision and get a critical mass of people that share that and just move forward, because it's never going to be perfect and it's never going to conform exactly to the latest study that was recently done.
How do you see that, Bill? I mean, organizations that are now in place in this region, what does that model of leadership look like? What is the collaboration that's occurring? where is it and how has it changed recently? I mean, I think that, really up until around 2002, 2003, somewhere around that era, we were still going through the depression of the late 70s and the 80s and the 90s. And things have sort of changed, and I think that means that there needs to also be a change in the teamwork, the collaboration. So how do you see that happening? And what are the different entities that are at the table now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're seeing that here today with Thrival. I think one of the exciting things is the number of organizations that have come together to support different things, and that really is a new model. The problems that we face today are too complex for any one group to solve. So it used to be that, a nonprofit would work in a particular sector, and that doesn't work anymore. It's really about public-private partnerships. It's about diverse stakeholders coming together to really solve a problem. But you have to layer that on commitment and courage. When we say commitment, too often you have people that are trying to solve problems in 3 to 5 year increments because that's what the foundations want to do. Not going to happen. Take the long-term approach. And I've only been, doing this particular job for 8 years, and I'm surprised at the number of organizations I've seen come and go and, sort of one-hit wonders. And what you realize is if you're going to solve this problem, there are no one-hit wonders. It's about the long game. And the other thing is courage. You're going to piss some people off along the way. Everybody's not going to like what you're doing. It's not about tweets, Facebook likes, etc. It's about getting the job done and doing that in as collaborative of a fashion as possible, but knowing that you're not going to be able to collaborate with everybody because everybody's not going to want to see you succeed, and everybody's not going to be on the same page.
Tara, you've been very successful in taking a leadership role and gathering others around you to take on causes really that nobody was taking on before. You found voids and were able to get yourself in there. There's a lot of people here who would probably like to be able to do the same thing, either for different types of causes or even for their own individual ability to see what they market in economic development terms become successful. Mm-hmm. So how do you do it?
You just do. I have this great phrase that I use all the time, self-authorization. Self-authorization means that you have the answers to the questions that you pose, and you are the best person to implement those answers. Now, with technology at our fingertips, you can do that. I started Cafe con Leche with literally no money. I was a resident artist at Most Wanted Fine Art. I had been a community organizer in Pittsburgh for about 5 years, and I just noticed these voids, and I kept looking for the answers, and no one had them. And I just started doing my own thing, and I started putting it out on Facebook and Twitter. I put some food out for people, and they came. So I think that when it comes to, finding that void, you have the answer. And I think, moreover, when it comes to bringing people together, it's really about comfort. People want to be comfortable where they're at, whether it's a physical space or whether it's on social media or an emotional space, whatever it is, people want to be comfortable. They want to feel that. And that ultimately is going to be what is going to determine what wins and what doesn't win. So when you think about how to start your own thing, think about what are the things that you can do at your fingertips, what are the things that you can do for free or for very little money, and what are the things that you can do that are going to make people feel comfortable.
We have to say goodbye to John and thank him for being here as well. He is a leader, and he inspires others to do great things. Going back and looking at like 2002 and lists and remembering when there was actual list that came out for the worst city for singles, and it was Pittsburgh. Still single. It wasn't a really good time back then, but anyways, the thing about it is the city's changed, yet it still remains Pittsburgh. And let me explain what that means to me. That means that you can make really great soup, and if you put too much salt in it, you ruin the soup. So as we see these next 5 to 10 years where people want to start investing in Pittsburgh from outside of this region and outside this country, and you start seeing apartment buildings popping up all along the riverfronts, and all these other things start to happen, and companies from around the world locate here to be a North American Global Innovation Center. And it's interesting that you see this happening in cities our size around the world, whether it's Bilbao, Bogota, Bristol. There's something that's happening. The research and development is pulling it in. How do you make it so you don't put too much salt in the soup? How do you make it that all this development and investment and everything else that occurs makes Pittsburgh no longer Pittsburgh, and we just become Portland or somewhere else that we don't want to become? So I honestly feel that sometimes that is the biggest challenge that I'll have during my time as mayor, is that I don't screw it up. So advice, what is it that we need to do to keep us screwy?
I don't know. I feel like I ask that question to myself every morning. I think, again, it goes back to my opening comments. When we think about the unseen people that are holding up the communities, we're talking about moms. Moms are the gatekeepers. So how are we supporting mothers? And how are we supporting mothers, especially who don't have other support systems or don't have sufficient support systems? If you really want to make a difference, I look to moms. Economic development is not quite as easy, and I am disheartened to see so many condos going up, but I also understand that that is not necessarily a Pittsburgh problem. That's a problem that's nationwide, and I think that that's part of a larger conversation that, going back to John Fetterman's comments, how do we collectively as a society address this? And a lot of people are in denial, and a lot of people who have very deep pockets don't care, and our pockets are not as deep. And so that's where I see the deficit, and I welcome more conversations around this, because I have not cracked that nut yet.
When you transform an economy, and like we've been able to do over the last 30, 40 years, it's taken a lot of money. It's taken a lot of subsidies. Quite frankly, to create an innovation economy, a lot of subsidies, whether that's federal money, whether that's state money, whether that's foundation money, literally billions of dollars. And it's a good thing, but we always have to make sure that when we look at subsidies, because subsidies, that's really in many ways not capitalism. Capitalism is, okay, I spend my money and I get a return for spending my money, then I pay it back. Well, when you get a subsidy, when you get a grant to do something in the private sector, there needs to be payback, and we're at a time now where the private market's taken off. I mean, we had to provide these subsidies to kickstart the region in many ways, whether it was real estate, whether it was innovation. Now, not so much, not as much. Or when we do provide those subsidies, there has to be a payback to those that aren't getting the benefit from the new economy, and then I think that's the challenge, because we see these things. We see $2,500 per month rent apartments, and I remember when Sliberty was Sliberty, so to see it now, it's like wow, it's like wow. But I also came here from D.C., where I bought a house for $120,000. 2 years later, sold it for $380,000. That same house is $900,000 house. Who can afford that? And that's not Pittsburgh. We need to stop. And I think when you said we don't want to be Portland, that's the beautiful thing. And what I love is let's be Pittsburgh. We don't want to be Silicon Valley. We don't want to be Portland. We want to be Pittsburgh. And there's something unique about, what makes up our DNA. And it's quite frankly, just regular everyday people. And those are the people that we need to figure out how to support. And we need to make sure that all of our, all the policies, all the things we provide subsidy for, have that inclusion, that equity piece baked in.
Yeah, I think when you bring up D.C., I lived down there in the late 80s and early 90s, and I remember if you were driving through Adams Morgan after midnight and you hit a red light, you kept going, because carjackings were rampant, drive-bys were rampant. And then you go to it now, and there's a jazz club at that same corner, and you can't afford the rent. I guess there's lessons that we can learn from around the country, because we were never at that party in the 90s. While the cranes were going up and the Panera Breads were being put down on every corner, and this city was still going through that recession. At that point, a recession, the Depression earlier. So what are lessons that we learn from other cities? What's missing? What don't we have? A lot of people will say a modern transportation system. But there's also another thought that the cities that get it, or the cities of the future, have 21st century infrastructure and technology and telecommunications, and 19th century food delivery systems and transportation. The trolleys, bikes, walking, and the food that's done locally, sustainable, resilient, so that it's the source. But what is missing? What don't we have that the other cities have? And almost like doing a SWOT analysis. What are those opportunities that are out there?
People. I mean, I think that we talk, it's very much of a which came first, the chicken or the egg. But at the end of the day, we can do a million great events like this, but it's the same people going. And if we really want to be transformative, we need to think about how are we actually keeping people here. And when I say people, I mean demographics that are reflective of the whole country, not just of Pittsburgh. So until, as a region, we reflect those demographics with the same population numbers, I'm not saying we need to be a 1 million person city, but percentage-wise, how are we reflecting the country? Because then people can look at us and say, oh, okay, this is an American city. Right now, we're not an American city. I think people think that we were part of the American history, but America doesn't look like Pittsburgh does. And I think that in order to attract and maintain people here, there does need to be better public transportation. We do need to focus on infrastructure. The highways are awful. Like driving here, I had that conversation with my Lyft driver. Thank you, Lyft, for being here. Lyft is a good thing to keep people here. So I think it's amenities like that that will really begin to get people, because people want to live in a cosmopolitan area. They want to live in places where they see themselves reflected in what happens after 5 and on the weekends, not just in a corporate office. They want to see themselves reflected in the civic structure, in the government structure, in the nonprofit structure, and right now, that's not at all where we're at.
Diversity. I mean, ditto. To get there, we're going to have to become a more tolerant city and a more tolerant region, because it sort of feeds on itself. When you don't have diversity, when you don't understand how to deal with diversity. I have a son, 14-year-old, and I left Pittsburgh when I was 18, lived in Atlanta, D.C., was a Spanish minor, and, lived in D.C., I took my son to D.C., and he said, wow, Daddy, there are a lot of Latinos here. And I felt like I failed, because this is the world. Right. The world's not Pittsburgh. I mean, between 2040 and 2050, the U.S. will be majority Latino and African American. That's the world, and that's the composition of every major city. But when we come to Pittsburgh, we're not there, and we got to get there. We got to get there.
Just a sort of off the cuff type of question. What's one thing in Pittsburgh that most people don't know about that you really enjoy? I'll jump in to give you time to think, because it is kind of off the cuff question. Not as much as the next one I'm going to ask, though. But two things, and they're both on the rivers, one on the Mon and one on the Allegheny. Yosa's Corner down in Hazelwood, great Hungarian restaurant that is only open when he wants it to be open and has no menu and serves on styrofoam. And by the way, Bobby, thank you for moving the Thrival Festival to Hazelwood. I mean, it really will be able to enhance everything that's happening down there and show off how Pittsburgh is changing. And my neighbors won't be knocking at my door anymore because you're down the street with bands. And then my second one's the Roberto Clemente Museum down in the Strip. And I just, I feel like it's an adult Kennywood. But what about you guys? What are some of the, maybe a hidden place that people might not know about that just makes you feel good?
I can go if you're okay. Yeah. I have, there's 3 places. So the first one is kind of surprising. I love Southside Station Square. I love Station Square because it's dense. It's right on the river. I love the river. There's restaurants in there, and it's not really a type of place that you would normally ever hear me say that I love. But I don't know. There's like this. You can go inside and you can taste wine from the homemade wine place. It's a cool little. It's like a nail salon. It's a cool little spot. I also love the Point because I love the rivers, so you get right next to the river. And the place where I feel at home, like whenever I walk in and I walk out just like with a smile on my face, is going to Las Palmas on Atwood in Oakland, because it's the small little Mexican bodega, and it just reminds me, even though I'm not Mexican, I'm Puerto Rican, it's close enough and I take it. They got a ton of Goya products.
Yeah, I'd have to say, it's funny, probably 4 months ago, I was in the Strip on a Saturday, and I was like, wow, this is different. I mean, I felt a vibrancy, a diversity, age diversity, gender diversity. I mean, there was a diversity that I hadn't seen, and it was at Marty's. It was at Marty's, which is really exciting to me. Also, the Savoy. I don't know, how many folks have been to the Savoy, but very cool restaurant. I mean, you would think you were in Miami, you were in Atlanta, and so it's those places that, to be quite honest, help keep me sane. Because they're places where I'm seeing diversity and seeing things that I always saw in other, in DC or Atlanta. I won't, those are probably some of the most cosmopolitan cities. So it's not like every city has that, but yeah.
No matter when I walk into Woolley's, there's always diversity.
Yeah.
And it's the poorest people in this entire region or this entire county and the richest people and they're shopping at the same store. There's something that's incredibly magical about that. And I took a group there, including Kimball Musk, Elon Musk's brother, and they were taking pictures. Because they just, it is like in any other city, would be in a public market house. It is its own store, though, and it doesn't cater to just high income, though it could, because it's the freshest fish and meats around. It advertises in the Courier. It's an amazing place, so I would have to agree with that as well. And the other thing, too, is born, raised, live, die Pittsburgh in 50 years. Hopefully live for 50 more years. But the thing is, I've never seen the restaurant explosion. I mean, what's happening now and the ability to go to Gaucho and wait in line for 40 minutes to be able to have that experience and know that next week another place is going to open and 2 weeks after that another place. And the goal now will be to make sure that next place is in Beachview and then in Knoxville and then in Manchester, and starting to see it spread throughout the city so every neighborhood has it. I think that's going to be one of the key indicators of this next 10 years. And again, I'll use the word red line, that it isn't just, here's the Cathedral of Learning, put a 1 mile radius around it, and this is where everything's going to be, that we start getting into the communities. So let me ask you this again, because I know that both of you, inclusion is a key part of it. And I want to go back to the how do you keep Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh? What are the goals when you see that happening to be able to have the restaurants in the neighborhood business districts come back, but not to push people out in the process?
Yeah. I think one of the things we have to do is we have to, and we're beginning to do it, is really put a focus on helping residents in some of our most distressed communities become empowered to take advantage of the economic opportunities that are presenting themselves in the communities. And but we have to realize that's full contact sport. And it's also very different work oftentimes than the work that we're traditionally used to doing with other populations. And when I say full contact sport, community development here is tough. I mean, it's sharp elbows, but that's Pittsburgh. That's the Steelers. I mean, we're going to take that extra hit. We might lose a game, but if we lose on the field because we just sort of laid down and quit, then that's when we get mad. And it's the same thing, but we really have to get in these communities. We have to listen to the residents. We have to have this overriding belief that folks can do whatever, given the tools and the opportunities, and we have to make it happen. No excuses. No excuses. So when the next community transforms, all those businesses need to be owned, or a good percentage of them need to be owned by residents. Not just folks who, there has to be a mixture because we do need, this to be a welcoming and warm city for newcomers, but we also have to make sure that there's a place for those that are here, and that's tough work.
Tara, this investment forced people out of neighborhoods, and those that had the ability to leave chose to leave. I mean, even the last 10 years, from 2002 to 2012, the council district that I represented in the East End grew by 10%. But the council district right next to me that Ricky Burgess represented lost 24% of the people. And now that we're going to see investment, that could drive people out as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an
What's the balance?
It's an interesting balance because people want to stay in a neighborhood where they can access the things that they need on a daily basis. I live in Bloomfield. I love living in Bloomfield because it's on a plateau, so I don't have to walk up a hill. The Short Save is down the road. I can get milk from Donatelli's. Like, it is all within a half-a-mile radius for me. I don't drive, so this is all walkable, and it's very easy for me. So when we think about places that have lost population, I'm not going to shout out any neighborhood or place, but we all know the places that are losing population. We ask ourselves why and who's moving, and I would say that, are they able to get a gallon of milk that they can afford? Are they able to get the kind of food that they want to eat in at a price that they can afford? Restaurants are great. I love restaurants, and it's always been a dream of mine to open a restaurant, so I by no means think that restaurants should not be a part of this picture. But the restaurants that we by and large see happening that are kind of gaining the attention and are really excited are very high price point restaurants. So if we look at bringing in a high price point restaurant into a neighborhood as a sign of success, that's one way to measure it. But the question becomes, the people who have lived there for 30 or 40 years, is that what they want? Is that what they need? And is that really going to help them stay? So if we want people to stay, we need to think about the people who are there and what are their everyday needs. What is the most important thing for them? That's the business that should open.
Very, very good point. One thing that we're working on right now that has you very excited.
I am personally really excited about the Best of Latino Burg. The nominations, if you go to my website, www.cafeconlechepgh.com, on the blog, there's a place where you can fill out your favorite Latino places in Pittsburgh. I'm super excited. We're going to be putting out the list in October, so you'll know where you can go and get the best food, what the small businesses are. We're going to make sure to give everybody plaques, get a press release out, so look out for that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Just beginning, so there hasn't been a press release, but we received a grant from a New York-based foundation to go through a planning process to look at the feasibility of creating an accelerator like was created in Cincinnati. They have a minority accelerator that has done an incredible job of getting the corporations lined up and to actually provide a commitment to the companies that go through the accelerator, and they've just seen tremendous results. The mayor helped us with secure those funds, but we're about to go through that planning process, and really excited because you've just seen a skyrocketing in the number of successful African American and Latino businesses in Cincinnati. They went from being significantly worse than Pittsburgh to now a national leader in terms of minority business creation. So
you take those two, and then you add to it and multiply to it times 20 with different organizations around the city, and that's how you change Pittsburgh for the positive. Exactly that. It's empowerment. It's changing this old idea of power that David Lawrence had like that and flipping it upside down and understand that's how this city is going to really do great things. It's people in this room that are able to make it happen. It's my team that comes to me with an idea a week from 50 different directions, and then they go and they carry the ball and they do it. And today, I mean, it's like what's making me happy today? Today, my chief of staff is very, very close to getting that Penn Plaza deal done in East Liberty. That they were a month ago, everyone in that building was given a 90-day letter to have to move out, and these were people who couldn't move out of their refrigerator, let alone their home. And now we have a model for how we're going to be dealing with this neighborhood by neighborhood. I hope it happens this week, that we can make the announcement.
That's awesome.
So with that, this is a city that's changing, and it's going to continue to change. And there's going to be a lot of great things that happen. And I could leave this cell phone, and I say this often too, on my desk for the next 2.5 years and go rent mopeds down in Puerto Rico. And the city will do great, except for the neighborhoods where it won't. And that's where our focus needs to be. Because if we're really going to be that city, that one that everyone around the world looks at and says, boy, they really got it right, it won't be because Google and Uber moved here. It will be because the people in Homewood and in Manchester, in Knoxville, had an opportunity for a job with it. And you know what the beautiful thing is? We already did it back in the 1920s. And when people had the opportunity to work in the mill, we made sure that they had an opportunity to become the middle class and send their kids to college and own their own home. We just got to remember what our grandparents and our parents taught us and do it again. A new economy, an old lesson. Let's move the ball forward. Thanks, guys.